Hey, friends, welcome to the Soul Unleashed podcast. I decided I would do this by video, and of course, it's also available in audio, but I want to do it because today's kind of a special day for me. This is the last day in our home where we've been living for the past 22 years almost. And so it's a difficult day emotionally, spiritually, and I want to use that as an opportunity to talk about this podcast about basically letting go and how that can be a journey to spiritual freedom. So for those of you that are letting go of all different kinds of things, I thought this might be helpful. We've been in this house for about 22 years. As many of you know, my wife, Marianne, suffered a stroke over 2 years ago, and she's been hospitalized since then, and she's been unable to come back to the house here. And she'll never be able to come back to a place like this where we have a lot of stairs in this home. And so I'm moving to get closer to her. And it was a difficult decision to make to leave the house. And then for any of you who lived in a home for a period of time, know what happens is things just seem to pile up. And we had all kinds of things from our children and our grandchildren, things I uncovered that I didn't even know we had, plus things from my mother, my father. And when she passed, some of those things came to me. And there's just a feeling of emotional feeling of letting these things go and going through these things. There's a wonderful scene in the movie Meet the Fockers, for those of you that have seen that, where they go to visit the home of this woman's new husband, the Fockers, and in there they have a shrine built to him which has all his trophies from when he was a little kid, through whatever. And the funny scene, of course, is that they made such a shrine out of all his trophies and awards. And here he is, a full-grown adult man. She's married this guy, and it just seems ridiculous. And I was thinking of that as I was going through the trophies from our sons. The reason it's been very difficult for me, of course, is because our one son Matthew passed away in 2020, and many of the things that we had from him, we put in the storage and didn't want to look at them. And of course I had to go through those things getting ready to move, and I couldn't keep a lot of those things. So I think that though there's some value in talking about how releasing these things, releasing the emotional attachment, can help in awakening and enlightenment. Most corners of the world, releasing and letting go is a sign of spiritual enlightenment and moving to a different spiritual plane. But as those of you who know, when you go through these things, the boxes, the artwork from when they were children, our grandchildren's artwork, now our grandchildren are a lot closer to when they made that stuff than our sons are, but it was things that they made, when they were in kindergarten and first grade that I had not seen really since then. My wife had saved. Plus, my wife had saved every card almost that I gave her. I didn't know this. And she had tons of letters that I had written to her when I was in the military, before we were married, and shortly after we were married. Once our first son came into the world, she stopped being so meticulous about storing all these things. But I had no idea that she had all of these letters that she had saved, and I still haven't gone through them. I just looked at a couple of them, but I wrote them to her when I was deployed different places, and I said some pretty stupid things then. I'm stupid in terms of being emotional and loving, and I guess it's not stupid really, but it's something that I don't want to see published in a book or a magazine. But she saved all those things. So there's a wonderful book. Things by Marie Kondo, where she talks about organizing things and letting things go. And so what I tried to do as I was going through this was I would make the decision to be thankful for whatever that thing was. So if it's all our son's trophies and all the sports swimming medals and ribbons. For those of you involved in children's swimming, they get a ribbon almost every meet, right? So we had plastic bags full of ribbons from, when they started swimming at age 4 or 5, all the way through high school. And, what to do with those? So I threw them all out. some of those things that belonged to our other son who, had attained All-American status and had won some pretty significant awards through college. I gave that stuff to him. I said, it's up to you. If you want to keep that stuff, great. But we can't keep it. So I think that it's helpful to make the decision to let that stuff go and be thankful for it and then just trash it. Another cool thing I did was I took pictures of everything. So for a lot of things, like I had a ton of T-shirts that date back years and years, right? When I used to ride on my motorcycle to a specific place, particularly if it was a Harley dealership, I would get a Harley T-shirt. I made the decision early on in my life that I wasn't going to be one of those people that just collects T-shirts if I haven't been to those places. So I went to a lot of places, and as I was there, I would get the T-shirt, and that was kind of cool, and I'd wear it for a while and then forget about it. But anyway, as I was going through the closets, I had boxes and stacks of these T-shirts, and I just took pictures of them. And I've since shared those pictures of some of those T-shirts with my wife. Some of them were hers, and so she remembers those too. Anyway, I love the there's a saying by C.S. Lewis, which is, you don't have a soul, you are a soul, and you have a body. So you're a soul with a body, and so we're a soul going through this life, this world. I talk about this all the time as part of my podcast. We're here experiencing this world, and we have to let go. Quick story. When I first made the decision to move, it's been a couple months, but I told my grandchildren, and my granddaughter, God bless her, she's 10, and she found out we were moving, and this was maybe 4 or 5 weeks ago, and she said, I want to go see the house. And I said, okay, sweetie, well, you can come see the house. And I brought her here, and at that point I had already started moving a lot of things out. A couple of the rooms were cleaned out, so it looked very different already to her. And she went through the house, and she, looked at some things, and there were little stuffed animals that she always loved since she was a little girl. This is the only home that she's known where we've lived. And most of those things that she had grown somewhat attached to were gone by that time. Anyway, she went through the house, and we went down to the playground, which is down the street, and she's too big for all that stuff now. And she played around a little bit. We got back in the car, and we were starting to drive away, and I noticed that she was hiding her face in the back seat. And so I pulled the car over, and I got out, and I went back to her, and she was crying. And I said, it's okay, sweetheart. And, she said something, like, I don't want you to move. But that is a great teaching point for a child, I think. And I said to her what my grandmother said to me when my grandmother moved. She moved a couple times, but I remember the first time she moved, it was from the only home I knew where she had lived. And she said, a home is just a home. A home is just a house. What makes it a home is people that you love. And so she said, stick to the people that you love, and just always remember that a home is just a house. And that was hard for me to even accept then. I never really thought about it too much, but I said the same thing to my granddaughter. And, for many of you that are dealing with these kind of things, hopefully that's the same kind of lesson you're able to impart to your children as you go through this. There are a lot of wonderful things that you can do, I think, spiritually, to remind yourself that you can just let go of these things. I mentioned in a previous podcast, and this is just an example of synchronicities and spirit, but I was sitting in a coffee shop, and I was going through writing out something about my last podcast about how you can find your spiritual mentor, and can your spiritual mentor be, or spiritual guide be a relative, a deceased relative. And out of the blue, my niece texted me on WhatsApp from Paris, France. And she has rarely ever talked to me. I mean, I love her to death, but, I have no reason to talk to her regularly. But she messaged me with a message that she had received from my mother, who's passed in spirit. And I hope to have Amy on here soon, but she said that as she was trying to talk to my mother, she received this message, And the message basically said, let go, release attachment, power and love come from within. And that sometimes it's hard for us to realize that when everything seems so ... human. And it was just how my mother would kind of talk to me. And, she told Amy it was a message for me. And then the funny thing was my father had also jumped into that conversation. He's in spirit. And what she wrote was exactly how he would speak, which was, hey, just give it a couple months. Don't get upset about it. Everything's going to be fine. And that's kind of how he was. Very, very simple, very direct. And also he said that he was sitting next to me as I was going through the boxes. Now, Amy, who sent this to me, she doesn't know what I'm doing or that I'm going through boxes or that I'm going through this transition. And it was just really amazing to me that my father would say that. And I had just recently gone through some boxes of his high school yearbooks. So his high school yearbook from 1949, my mother's high school yearbook, 1950, I found those in some boxes and was going through them and was just amazed about that. Another thing that I found, which is really cool, and you might go through some of these things yourself, is that I had a whole bunch of framed photographs. What do you do with all those things, right? When you're taking everything off the walls in your house, in some cases there's hundreds of these photographs that are framed, beautiful frames. What do you do? My decision was to take most of them out of the frames and stack them, store them, because I'm going to eventually digitize them. But one of those frames was a frame that my grandmother had passed on to my mother, passed on to me, and it was of my mother and father's wedding invitation. Now, when they were married, my parents were married in 1954. They didn't hire a photographer. They were trying to save money. So they got a friend to be the wedding photographer. Everything I've read about this is a bad idea. And it was a bad idea. What happened was their friend somehow screwed it up and destroyed all the photographs when he was going through the development process. So there were some black and white photographs that other people had taken, of them coming down the aisle or some other things. And I have seen those. So it's not like we don't have no photographs of my mother and father, but nothing like you'd see color photographs or black and white photographs where they're posed and they're professional, right? Anyway, in this frame was an invitation to their wedding. And so I took it apart very carefully and I pulled the invitation out. And as I pulled the invitation out, a picture fell out of the inside of the invitation. And it was a 5x7 photograph of my mother in color in front of the backyard, in front of a grotto that they used to have. But it was a very beautiful picture, and the only one I've seen of her in color in her wedding gown. And had I not been going through this process, taking things apart, and going through this emotional experience, I probably wouldn't have known that. And letting go does not mean forgetting. You hold love for those things, and you hold love for what was, and you embrace it, and then you let it go. And that's how I had to address things with all the stuff about my son. My parents was easier, right? We expect our parents to pass, and we expect to be able to to deal with and help them when they pass. But anyway, I found it difficult with my son, and so that's what I had to do was hold it, be thankful for it, and then let it go. So basically, what you want to do is move forward. There's power in letting go. There's a saying by I'm looking here now. It's Lao Tzu, TZU. He says, "When I let go of what I am, I become what I might be." And many famous teachers, Buddha has a saying about letting go, that when you let go, you become free. I never really appreciated that really until recently. And we had moved a lot in the military. We had moved a lot other places. For some reason, this one really hits me. And that's why I want to do this now before I moved, and to share with you what I was going through in the hope that that you might find some comfort in being thankful for what you have and letting it go, and realizing that the importance of everything is in the love you have for people. And you might be able to reflect on your own attachments and what you can do to release things. So there's a basic affirmation that I've heard. I don't know who told it to me, but it's basically, when I release what no longer serves me, I embrace what nourishes my soul. And so I'm excited about what I'm going towards, what I'm thinking of, what I'm moving towards. I read a book. I'm going to close with this, but I read a book recently, which was called The Signs of Miracles, by Dr. Charnel. I'll put the link in the thing, and I hope to have her on my podcast also. But Dr. Charnel, was one of the things that she said was, it was about manifesting and what you want to happen in the future, and always be thinking of, the question is, what am I thinking? Because what I'm thinking, thoughts become things, and what I'm thinking becomes something, becomes things. And so she had a little sticker that she stuck on a lot of things, which said, what am I thinking? And so right now, what I'm thinking is, I want to be positive, thankful, and let these things go, release the attachment, and try and move forward to the future and be excited about the future. And another way that I try and be grateful for this time I had here is, I want to make our home as welcoming for the people that are moving in as I can. So I'm leaving them a letter, explaining kind of things about the house and the neighborhood, and to help them as much as I can, because I want them to be as happy here as we were. And that also makes it a little bit easier to let things go. So that's the podcast for today. I don't know when I'll do the next podcast. I don't know where I don't have a place to live yet. I don't have a place where I'm going to move to yet. So when I get settled and I get that place figured out, I may be doing my next podcast on my cell phone, but we'll see. But thank you for listening. I love being able to share things with you. I hope that you can, if you're facing these kind of things of holding on to something, that you can release and let go, and appreciate that your power and your love comes from within. Thank you, and bye-bye for now.